Okay, so thank you so much for everybody to attending today. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to connect with Joseph, and Joseph is my dear brothers as well. So I known him for almost 15, 16, 17, 18. I don't know very exactly, but somewhere else there. So in Chicago, that was our first meetings in Chicago. That was wonderful. That's where he lived. So I'm so happy that is, Joseph is willing to share his experience and also in the dance world. So Joseph, the person's like that. There's no way to describe in a word. He had done so much work in his life and on for the dance to preserve the dance and save the life. Not only that, like he's growing up like he's been studying the not only the like the first start with the belly dance and went to the Japan learning about all the Japanese no boat whatever that called there in Japan. I mean he's amazing and also not now he's not only the dancer he also that writing skills like that. He has written even my dance articles for many Buddha door. He keep writings about my dance, and it was so fascinated with that. Now I'm involved with him with a project together with the Joseph. So that was the wonderful project where he did. He was invited me to be part of that about the Dharma Dhatu Mandala and the Tabo. I was be part of the, I was in a part of that. So I was so pleased to honor and have invite the Josephs. So I don't know how much I can talk about him. He had done the research, stay in Bhutan for many years and made the documentaries and you know films about the Bhutans, and also went to India, Sri Lanka, and lots of different countries. So he's like a universe dance masters that I can say. So that's why I was so honored to have him for today with our 12-year anniversary. So this year 12-year anniversary is slightly different than how we try to make it more friendly, more families this year rather than the top level but scholars. And last that was 10 years, the 10-year anniversary, we did it that way. So this is our very cozy and families gathering. That's we are doing. So we are so honored, the Josephs, and thank you for present. Even you have to be rushed into the Switzerland the day before yesterday. It's the middle of the night there, but you are willing to share your knowledge for us within our community. So I'll just give you floor for you, so you can keep continuous.
Thank you, Prashwell. That was the best introduction I ever had. I really liked it. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. I'm going to start my talk a little unusually. I'm not drunk, I'm not stoned, and I'm not on drugs. I flew to Switzerland late last night to see a sick friend, and I'm so tired. But the chance to see Helen and Miranda and Prajwal, I would do it anytime. And Prajwal is right. He's one of my dear friends, and it's a pleasure that we're all here together. What dharma and karma we have that we're all connected at all, as Prajwal brings this ancient tradition to the world. That's really what we're celebrating here. The only Newar temple outside of Kathmandu, and we have any connection to it at all? This huge, unprecedented act in all of the history of 2,500-year history of Buddhism. There's no parallel to what Prajwal has done. And so when Prajwal asked me to speak about the importance of dance in the world, and someone whose tradition didn't go public till 1957, and his father said, well, it's been secret for hundreds of years, you take it public. All right? And I have more anxiety about it than Prajwal does, and I've been so admired Prajwal's ability to take this charge, as I've wondered myself, but no one's ever asked me to speak on the importance of dancing in the world, which sort of talks about a world of dance, which is almost a new idea. 100 years ago, anthropology didn't even exist. There was a World's Fair in 1893, and that was the first time anybody in the West saw a belly dancer. And that's just not that long ago. It's 100 years ago. So the world of dance even getting to know itself, has been something that my life has kind of exemplified in a way. And so I'm going to not talk too long because I'm dying to hear Helen and company talk about the temple, and give some time for questions. But, I started out as a kid in Michigan. And I was a really good athlete from a young age. And even at the age of 13 or 14, you run around in a circle as fast as you can. At the end, you want to vomit. And I was like, there's got to be something better than this, to do with my body than just run in a circle. And I was a good runner, and wrestler and diver and stuff. So I had some facility with my body. And then someone came into me and said, my mom is a dance teacher. You should take dance lessons. No. Well, okay, I'll take tap, but I won't take ballet, And so then you take the tap class and you go, God, look at those ballet dancers. And here's this kid from the Midwest, and I grew up in a nice town. We had musical education and dance education, but I'd never seen anything like classical ballet. I'd never seen anything be so important to somebody. I knew athletes, I knew people that got scholarships that did things, but when I saw ballet dancers, they dedicated their whole life to it. It was hard work. It required skill and talent and perseverance and dedication and injury. And I'd never seen any kind of commitment like that in any field. And so as a young teen, I was like, wow. And when I do this ballet dancing that's much harder than sports, I feel so like I'm doing something for somebody else, not like I'm just doing something to win something. And I really loved it. And so back in those days, the 1970s, most professional ballet dancers did not go to college. Now that's changed a little bit these days. There's programs and things, but back then you didn't. So I actually, even though I was really well educated as a child, I went to an arts academy, I had really good tutors in Greek and Latin. I was very well educated. I decided to go to the School of the Washington Ballet instead of college. And I'll always remember my father. I'm from a large family, and you got this, your fifth child's going to be a ballet dancer, even though he was smart enough to go to good college. And he saw one of his colleagues at work come up to him and said, oh no, what is this guy going to say? And he said, well, I hear your kid's going to a ballet school. My dad said, yeah, he's going, leaves in the fall. And he said, my kid doesn't know what he wants to do. I wish my kid knew what he wanted to do. I wouldn't even care what it was. He said, how great to have a kid that knows what he wants to do. So I went to the Washington Ballet School, and quite fortuitously, the New York City Ballet had come to Washington directly from London, and they were missing some dancers. And they called the Washington Ballet, said, we need 3 dancers. One of them was a dark-haired, burly youth to have a peasant role in Coppelia. Great, so I got the part. But I didn't know that Mikhail Baryshnikov was dancing the main role with Patricia McBride. And at that time, Mikhail Baryshnikov was the most famous dancer in the world. He was a celebrity. He was a movie star. He was a fashion horse. He was a celebrity, larger than life. And I was a peasant in the back. I had a bucket. That was my role, peasant with a bucket. And I was in the back, and the great choreographer, George Balanchine, a Russian emigre, who revolutionized the art of ballet and turned it into an intellectual exercise, was the choreographer of this ballet, Coppelia. He was old and he was sick. And when Balanchine didn't come to the theater, Baryshnikov didn't do his steps. He did his own steps, very show-off Russian steps. So the audience was like, Baryshnikov, Baryshnikov. And I'm in the back with my bucket. I'm thinking, wait, what about the guy in the hospital? I was connecting more to the guy in the hospital that choreographed the dance than the big celebrity. And also as a teenager, I was like, well, this man is the top of my field. I'm never gonna be this guy. And I looked around and I didn't see any 30-year-old men that I wanted to be. And not that there was anything wrong with them, but there weren't a lot of options for older male dancers. You became a hairdresser or a florist or a dance teacher, pretty much. Those were your options. And I liked them, but I was like, I haven't used my brain since I started doing ballet. And I love ballet. To this day, I love ballet. I was a dance critic for 36 years. I love ballet, but there is a limit to what a concert, artistic, commercial dance can do. And if you think about concert dancing and commercial dancing, for one thing, it all faces front, you know? And I always remember the choreographer, Mark Morris, who's a modern choreographer that comes out of folk dance. And he revolutionized the dance world because he would have dancers that didn't look to the front all the time. He had dancers that going in a circle that faced any direction. And they thought, oh, this is revolutionary. The dancers don't face front. And I thought there was sort of an interesting way of turning dance into a painting, but the idea that you're always facing front, everything is this presentational form. And so at the age of 22, I left ballet. I enjoyed it, but I wanted to go back to school. And I went to a small school in Annapolis called St. John's College, where they only teach what we call the great books of Western civilization. So there's no textbooks. It's only original writings in Greek and in Latin, and German and French. And you go through the great books, and it's a Socratic method of teaching. So it's a discussion. And you use a group to kind of come up with a new idea. It's an ancient way of discursive thought, the Socratic method of teaching. And so I was reading my first year, the Greek tragedies, the great Greek tragedies, the public performances in ancient Greece. And these public performances were so important to Greek culture. Greek amphitheaters were built just for this kind of performance. And a patron was obliged to pay for it. And thirdly, every citizen had to attend. Now, not everybody was a citizen, but every citizen had to attend. And I thought, what sort of a culture brought all the forces together of society and architecture and poetry and literature and history and myth and dancing and drama and social purpose and civic purpose? I'd never seen such a thing. It was amazing. And then as I got into it more, I learned that, oh, we have the texts in Greek. And a lot of people don't know, but Greek tragic texts are a kind of scanned rhythmic poetry. And that poetry is the rhythm of the dancing. So we actually have the poetry from the Greek tragedies and the rhythms of the dancing. And we have the amphitheaters. Guess what we don't have? We don't have the dance. And I was like, why would you lose this dance, this oldest dance of Greek civilization, the seed of all of Western civilization, that really is the classical ideal behind classical ballet? But in fact, I learned that when Christianity became powerful, the theology separated the body and the soul. So suddenly in the ancient dancing, the body and the soul and the mind and the city and the community and the religion and this peace and civic order were all together. And with Christianity, suddenly the body and the soul are separated. And the soul is holy and the body is the location of sin. So the body becomes this denigrated thing. And then later in Western philosophy, we got the humanists and the Reformation and Descartes and others, and they separated the body from the mind. I think, therefore I am. Why not? I'm sitting in this chair, therefore I am. Why not? I just turned in a circle, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. It's one of the most narrow-minded things I've ever heard. But it really is the seed of Western thought. We prioritize our own thinking more than something greater than us. We prioritize our thinking. And it really put dancing into a lower class. To this day, there's an academic bias against dancing. Dancing is still associated with prostitution and social interaction, with concert things. I don't know how many of you follow the dance world. It's full of sex scandals. And it's really, so it's a place where dancing doesn't have the honor it once had in our own culture. And I was at a very small school. There were only 100 people in my graduating class. And everybody knew what everybody thought about everything. It was really small. So we weren't so stuck on our own ideas. It's like, oh, please, I know my own ideas. What are your ideas? I've had enough of my ideas. Tell me some of yours. But in being in this place, I met a professor who was an expert in ancient Greek poetry. And he knew all the rhythms. And he knew the language. And he knew the texts. And he said, I've always wanted to see this danced. If you get some people together, I will train them in the ancient Greek, and I will teach them the poetry and the scansion and the rhythms to go with it if you would choreograph it. So one of the first choreographies I ever did in my life was to Aeschylus, the ancient Greek playwright who wrote some of the oldest Greek tragedies. And the people at my school knew, like, Houseal, he's really bummed out that we don't have a connection to this anymore. And that we lost our connection to our own, I would say, Gnostic, Gnostic, a mystical experience, Gnostic, a sense of something greater than you, a mystical sense. We lost our connection to our own Gnostic dancing. And it really kind of shattered my beliefs that I could find something important about dancing in it. And in my junior year, a poet who knew a lot about poetry. He was from the South. He was a rough kind of guy. He said, Joe, I heard you're upset that we don't have any connection to ancient Greek tragic dancing. And I said, yeah, I'm kind of upset about it. He said, look, there's this thing called no theater, and it's in Japan, and it still exists. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, the American poet Fenollosa went over in the early 20th century and befriended the last no actor. Now, I know the grandchildren of this actor, and they said he was the worst student. He couldn't sing, he couldn't dance. They said, but he probably saved the art form because he realized there's something really important here. Now, this little legacy of Western poetic history, a lot of people don't know, but Fenollosa's personal secretary was Pound, the poet Ezra Pound. And so Ezra Pound took Fenollosa's no notes and wrote a book called No that's just fascinating, but it's very Ezra Pound. It's very clever with language. It's great. But he wrote this book on no from his poetic point of view. And Pound's secretary was W.B. Yeats. So it went from Fenollosa to Pound to Yeats, two of the most important poets of the 20th century, who really realized, and Yeats was like, now you got to remember, and this is why I'm always a little suspicious when I hear cultural appropriation, because any artist is going to be intrigued by something they don't fully understand. So Yeats never saw no play, never saw no text. He heard a bad audio recording around 1920 of a no chant. And he saw this kind of huckster going around Europe, Michio Ito, saying he was a no actor, saying he was a kabuki actor, saying he was whatever. So he kind of saw something. But Yeats understood something about the no theater because he wrote no plays in English. They're English poetic dramas that he wrote based on no plays. And so you see this quiver of interest in the ancient world. I'm going to switch now from the poetry world to the dance world. I don't know how many of you know a lot about Western dance tradition, but most of you probably have heard of Isadora Duncan, the great feminist, really, of the early 20th century and late 19th century, who burned the corset. She burned the bra before anybody else. And she would wear tunics on stage and she'd lie on the floor and she'd dance to symphonic music. I mean, nobody can dance to symphonic music. You need to dance to dance music. But dance music was, so dance music sort of meant circus music. And she was like, no, I want great music. I want monumental music. But Isadora Duncan believed that something was missing in Western dance. Now, classical ballet at that time of the 18th, 19th century was very oversweet. it was saccharine almost. It was super pretty. The women were kind of taken advantage of. Everything was about prettiness almost. And she's like, look, I'm not a dancer to be pretty. I'm a dancer to express my soul. And no one had said stuff like this, certainly not a woman, and wanting to dance, and she was probably the most famous woman in the world in her time. Just following her, Ruth St. Denis and Ted Shawn were great American dancers and pioneers who had, again, interesting origins. Ruth St. Denis comes out of vaudeville, and Ted Shawn married her. And at that time, she started because she saw Cleopatra cigarettes, a package of Cleopatra cigarettes. And she's like, that's interesting. I'm going to do a dance based on this package of Cleopatra cigarettes. And she was obviously a very great dancer. And she met Ted Shawn, but she was doing exotic dancing, what they called aesthetic dancing, in the teens and 20s. So she was doing these dances that evoked ancient empires and Japan. Nobody knew what Japan was. Nobody knew where Japan was, but she had a Japanese dance. She had an Indian dance. And so Ted Shawn, who was much younger than her, finally met her and they married. But it was Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis that did a 2-year tour of Asia in 1925 and 26 with their dance company, Denis Shawn. And this is really pre-modern Asia. Most of the kings of Asia were still the kings of Asia. And they were pretty much hosted by the kings and queens and courts of Asia. And they took this whole tour. And by the time they came back through Japan, 18 months later, there were 2 shows in Japan based on their group having popular shows in Japan. So it wasn't just the Westerners were interested in the East. The East was interested in the West. The East was interested in the West doing the East. And this was a popular thing. But Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis learned there was something else about dancing. And they learned men could dance, that dancing was serious, that dancing was spiritual, that dancing was traditional and respectful, and had ancient roots about the wholeness of being. And these were very new notions in the West. Isadora Duncan was the only person who even started talking about those. Now, a lot of people don't know Ted Shawn was Martha Graham's teacher. And Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis, they had an Aztec ballet, and they had an American Indian ballet, and they had a Japanese ballet, and they had a Chinese ballet. But when they went to Japan and China, the artists loved them. They actually were the toast of the town. So the idea that the Asians didn't like them, didn't they? It loved them. But what the Asians saw was, wow, dance for these Westerners is just so creative. They would meet dancers in the morning and come back at night with a new piece. And they'd never seen so much creativity and so much robust interest in it. And of course, they did a lot of things hokily, you might say, a little hokey, but they were just seeing it. So the Asian dancers they encountered, like, they'd never seen dancing so creative or so individual. And so at that time, Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Denis, in a way, represented the best of America. They were very famous around the world and famous as ambassadors of the United States and the free thinking of the United States and what you could do with that. And so it was very interesting when in my 30s, I learned I was born on Ted Shawn's birthday. And I thought, well, I'd already been working with dancers from all over the world. I thought, oh, wow, I must be Ted Shawn's reincarnation. So I went and asked the 2 people who knew him that were still alive. One was the dancer Sybil Shearer, who was a great modern dancer in the 30s. And the other was Jane Sherman, who danced on the tour of Asia in 1925 and 26. And she was 99. She lived to be 104. She was 16 when she did that tour of Asia in 1925. Well, both Sybil and they assured me I was not Ted Shawn's reincarnation. There was no way possible. It's like, no way. And they had different reasons, but they were like, no way, And I remember, I said, Jane, they both started laughing. And, Jane, I said, why am I not Ted Shawn's reincarnation? And And Jane said, well, first of all, she said, Ted was huge. Ted was like 6'2". Ted was a big guy. She said, if you'd have met Ted, you would have thought he was a banker. She said, you wave your arms around and you just wear whatever you want. She said, Ted Shawn knew that if anybody could criticize what he was doing, men would never dance. So he had to be respectable. He was always buttoned up. He always controlled his movement. And he represented virility in dancing with his famous wife, Ruth St. Denis. But he did that to protect the impression of masculinity in dancing. And she said, you're a product of Ted. Because of Ted's discipline, you can be free. And I asked Sybil, and I said, Sybil, do you think I'm Ted Shawn's reincarnation? And she said, well, I did a couple photo shoots with them, with the Dennis Shawn people. And she said, no way. She said, I've seen you dance. You're a very lyrical dancer. You have a kind of lithe quality when you dance. And I was like, so she said, Ted was just so hokey. And I said, well, okay, but I have a lot of sympathy for Ted and she said, if people knew he was gay, that was the end of male dancing in America. And he knew it, and they all knew it. And he did that. And so he went on to just represent this super virility that is hokey, but that's why he did it. So I have it on good authority that I'm not Ted Shawn's reincarnation, but I really have done a lot of the things that he's done, I think just because that echo of trying to find importance in dancing is a real thing. I think some of the people in our Mudra project, modern dancers, are really connecting with that. People that don't have, the West doesn't have traditions like Prajwal's tradition. We don't have them. We don't have these living ancient traditions, but we do have modern people who are intelligent and really good dancers that want to understand it. And so how do you bridge that? How do you bridge that? And how do you let people like me that don't know anything about anything meet someone like Prajwal who knows everything about an ancient tradition? And other dancers are in the same place. Like, we want to talk to you and we want to know what your experience is. Are we having the same experience? The way you describe your dancing experience, is that the way we're describing our experience? And so it's been a very interesting balance of trying to understand how people are coming to these traditions. And I think with Prajwal's temple, now in its 12th anniversary, the symbol of the world beginning to understand the importance of it. Now, I just want to say something. I got a little time. I read an interview today by Madonna that she just gave. It's in V magazine with a racy photo shoot. But in this interview, a lot of people don't know Madonna was a dance major at University of Michigan. And she went to New York to be a modern dancer. She didn't go to New York to be a pop star. She went to New York to be a modern dancer. She danced with Alvin Ailey. She danced with Martha Graham. She studied with all the great studios. And her recollections of the Graham studio are really wonderful. But in it, she says, look, I've never seen dancing so important. Here is this woman, Martha Graham, who danced until she couldn't walk, which is kind of Asian. A lot of the Western dance traditions, you quit in your 30s and 40s. So here was this person that kept dancing, and Martha Graham, it was visceral, it was emotional, it was psychological, it was hard to do, it was full of angst. And I just never seen dance mean so much. But here's the comment that I really took away from her interview. She said, back then, and this is the mid 70s, 1970s, she said, artists of all kinds knew about Martha Graham. They knew about Alvin Ailey. They knew about Eric Hawkins. They knew about Charles Weidman. They knew about these dance companies. They knew about Alvin Ailey. And it was part of being an artist that you knew about concert art dance artists. And the rising of modern dance in America was very much around personalities. Ted Shawn, Ruth St. Denis, Merce Cunningham, Martha Graham. It's around personalities, which is one of the reasons Sybil Shearer left. And she just said, I hate it when people call me a professional dancer. I'm not a dancer by profession. I'm a dancer by nature. And so she always took it as an insult if you called her a professional dancer. So these were the Americans who were trying to find, but Madonna talking about what Martha Graham meant to her. And then Madonna got very famous and they became good friends. And it was actually Martha Graham who called her Madam X, which is the name of her current project. So Martha Graham gave her that name, Madam X. She said, because she'd come to class every day with the latest experiment. She said, I don't know what to call you. I'm just going to call you Madam X. But it was a really interesting story about a time when dancing and knowledge of dancing was more important to artists of all stripes. And this crossed over her discussion into collaborators. Who are you collaborating with? Who's your squad? You know, she was noticing Isamu Noguchi, the great Japanese artist and sculptor, did mini sets for Martha Graham. And so this is really, again, a notice of how important dance is and when it stands out in the West for being important, because kind of it's not. And so when it becomes important, people are like, wow, dance is really important to Yvonne Rainier. It's really important to Martha Graham. It's an importance we don't see. It's a rare importance, but it was still concert, commercial, artistic dancing. And so these times are when I finally went to Japan after my friend Grady told me about the No Theater. I said, I'm going to go study No Theater because it still exists and it's 800 years old and I'm going. So I won a scholarship to go to Japan for 6 weeks and I stayed for 7 years. And as anybody, and Miranda, I think you'll probably agree with me, when you go into an ancient tradition like Prajwal's or Japanese No, there's no end. There is no end to these well springs of culture and art. And even Prajwal, our great teacher and priest, if Prajwal wants to go deeper, he can go deeper. There's no end to it, period. If I wanted to study No Theater my whole life, there's more to go. If I want to go deeper, I can go deeper. And I always remember that about studying the Japanese No, that, you know, when I left Japan, oh man, I certainly knew less than when I arrived in Japan. I knew everything about Japan when I went to Japan. And when I left Japan, like, I don't understand anything about Japan. It's so deep and so complex. And really, the people who know it best are the people who can dedicate their whole life to it as a way of life, as a code of conduct, as a code of conduct that allows you to have a way of life, a code of conduct that allows you to be a spiritual conduit. They go together. The way of life and the code of conduct and the manner of spiritual power, they're connected. And so I really realized this, that it takes the commitment of a life to completely understand that. No, maybe it takes the commitment of a couple of generations, or maybe a lineage, or maybe a family, or maybe a clan, or maybe the Vajracharyas, or maybe it takes all of that. So what it allows you to have access to that endless well of knowledge and culture and spiritual knowledge is what the performer does. Now, Japanese No Theater is a hair's breadth away from a spiritual practice. It is a spiritual practice, in fact, but it is very much an art form. And the founder of No made it an art form. It was before No, it was more a trance-based performance style. And Sayami was like, look, if you're really in a trance, you're not going to follow the music. You're not going to do the steps. And if you're not in a trance, then you're faking it. And it's a false show. So Sayami said that the actor needed to cultivate a trance-like state. And the trick of No Theater is the trance part of it, and the metaphysical and the mystical part of No is so powerful, you can get lost in it. And that's the mastery of the artist, is to put it all together. And so after 7 years in Japan, I went to the Laban Center in London and did my postgraduate degree on the Japanese No Theater. And one of the questions my supervisor said, he said, this is England, and we want to compare things. So why don't you say how many professional ballet dancers there are in the world and how many professional no actors in the world? I said, well, good idea. I'll check that. So this was about early 90s maybe. And so I learned there were 30,000 professional ballet dancers in the world and 300 no actors. And I thought, there's a difference. And one tradition goes back to European courts, and another goes way, way back to the Muromachi era of Japan. And this was a real telling thing for me. And it was the beginning thing to say, like, even if the West wants to understand this, how are we going to understand this? Now, for those of us who are dancers or do practices, and I remember someone close to me asked me, like, how do you know something is true? When do you know something is true? And I said, well, basically, if the dancer in me says it's true, I think that it's really true. That's the me that I trust the most. And so if the dancer in me that is sort of the completest, simplest, easiest me in a way, says there's something true here, I can understand that. That isn't texts. That's not books. That's experience. So how can you have this experience if there's no temple? How can you have this experience if there's no priest? How can you have this experience unless Buddhist monks like you and want to show you their dances and invite you in to see and participate and see these dances? And when I went from England, I'd lived abroad 12 years and I wanted to go back and see my parents. They were older, and I moved back to the United States after 12 years abroad, living in Japan and living in England. And I really missed Asia. And I really missed being on the inside, because I wasn't a tourist in Japan. I was way deeply inside the traditional arts. I knew all the no actors. I knew all the kabuki actors. I studied with all of them. And I really missed it. And so I would meditate every day in my little apartment on Lake Michigan in Chicago. And I'd say, gosh, I'd sure like to go back to Asia. I'd sure like to go back on the inside. And one day while I was meditating, two monks walked by the beach on my house, red robe monks. And the old monk would point to a tree and the young monk would look at the tree. And the old monk would point to the lake and the young monk would look at the lake. And I thought, God, I can make tea. I can make tea good enough for an Asian. So I threw my windows open. I said, Lama, Lama. I just assumed they were Tibetan. Lama, Lama, come in and have some tea. So these two, this older monk and this young monk, came in, and I had all Japanese furniture. So I had tables on the floor with cushions around them. And I invited them in. And the old monk spoke to me. And the old monk said, why aren't you at work? And I said, well, I am at work. And he said, what do you do? And at that time, I was working on this project that was pretty cool. It was taking the motion captured movements of traditional Asian dancers and putting them into Asian sculpture and making the Asian sculptures dance like real Asian dancers. And I thought I was pretty cool. So I was telling these two monks, like, well, I'm doing this project, to make these ancient sculptures dance. And the younger monk says, oh, I think my brother will do that. I said, oh, really? Who's your brother? And he asked for a dictionary. Reincarnation. Your brother's the reincarnation. Yes. I said, oh, well, why do you think that your brother would do this project? Is he a dancer? And they both bowed their heads. And the older monk said, he's the best dancer in many generations. And I was like, well, where are you from? Tibet? And the young one said, no, we are from Ladakh. I'd never heard of Ladakh. So we got a globe. There was no Ladakh on it. Got out the atlas, no Ladakh in it. I believed them. There was a place called Ladakh, but we couldn't find it. So we sat there, and the old monk took his finger and pointed it right at my third eye and said, you come to Ladakh. I said, okay, I'll come to Ladakh. And the next summer I went to Ladakh and I saw Vajrayana monks dancing. And I'd never seen dancing like that in my life. It was completely different purpose, a completely different yogic state. And I also realized, because I'm an old hand in the dance world, I realized they were having some fundamental issues, rehearsal issues, didactic issues. That's a big thing in ancient traditions, didactic issues. One person pointed out to me that if there's an ancient dance, they go, what do you mean by ancient dance? Well, it almost means a dance that has survived political change. It's a dance that has survived social change. And usually an ancient dance will change the way it's funded and will change the way it's organized, but it won't change what it is. And that's what society does. So an ancient dance survives through all of these changes in forms of funding, in social structure, in role in the community. And this is really what an ancient dance is. It's a dance that survives through greatly changing culture. And what we see in the celebration of this 12-year anniversary of this temple is the survival, the thriving, the brilliance, the genius, the spirituality, thriving in the world. I think we're from Hong Kong to Switzerland tonight. That's about 3/4 of the world, you know, and this from a tradition that was unknown in 1957, was unknown to anybody. And now here we are, all connected by some karma or dharma or good luck. We're connected to Prajwal, and we all think that we've got a connection to this Newar temple in Portland. I have a connection to this Newar temple in Portland. Why? Because Prajwal has invited all of us to have a connection to it. And he doesn't judge how we make a connection to it. He lets us have our own, sometimes really stupid connection to it, until we get to that time when we can understand, oh, that's what you meant. Okay, oh, and then we realize later that wasn't really what he meant either, but still we practice. And I've always said the reason they call it practice is because it's practice. And that's what you have to do, is practice it. And my second trip to Ladakh, I went to Kathmandu and I saw some charya. And I was so amazed by the charya that I saw. And everyone in Bhaktapur and everyone in Patan and everyone in Kathmandu said, oh, you've got to meet this fellow Prajwal. He's the best dancer. You've got to meet him. So I learned about Prajwal in 2001. And I said, I have to meet this Prajwal. And as fate had it, a couple of years later, we did meet. And Prajwal taught me a really great lesson about my own life and career. And it's made me very calm and happy. And that was this, you know, I'm used to being a MC, a host, whatever you want to say, but it's hard to stand in front of a 35th generation priest and think you've got any reason to stand in front of him, or any of these great practitioners of ancient traditions. We've had enough of the people in front. We need to start putting the practitioners of the ancient traditions in front and letting them speak the truth of their tradition to those of us in the West and around the world that really want to learn it. And what a tall order to say anybody in the world can come and study this tradition. And this vihara is your vihara. It's our vihara. And this is a place where you can actually experientially and truly connect to this ancient form, and you can learn it. And I have to tell you, Prajwal, I went to the, was it the Vajra Yogini ritual that you performed at the temple? There, the beautiful temple, you had so many of your people from your community were there performing it with you. And you were doing this ritual that lasted many hours. And I think by the time the guests chimed in, your community and you had been there for 2 hours doing the first part of the ritual. And then we all clued in. And so I was really interested. Wow, how are they going to dance after doing 3 hours of chanting and mandala making and all of this? How are they going to dance? And I can't tell you how much I enjoyed the dancing that day, because everybody danced so freely. It was so free and beautiful. And everybody had taken their own 4 hours of meditation and turned it into their dance using, of course, the choreography, but it was the spiritual freedom that had come from all of this beautiful ritual enactment that gave this power to this dancing that clearly everybody was connected to, and even people watching it could be connected to. It wasn't commercial, it wasn't a performance, it wasn't concert dancing. It was true ritual dance with an expanded community, and it retained its ritual flavor. And I think one of the reasons is that there's a real vihara in Portland, Oregon, with a real Vajracharya priest there who has the spirit of creating a community around him to taste the real flavor of these ancient dances. And so I sort of felt like, wow, in meeting Prajwal, my dream came true. I knew there had to be an ancient dance that was a whole body experience that involved the community and architecture and art and civic purpose. And I've talked to Prajwal about this. And you can't help but wonder if maybe this is the real time for Charyan Richa. Maybe the whole reason was to get it here. Maybe it's coming to the world just when the world needs it most. And I do the offering at the beginning of the dance that you teach. I do it 7 times every morning when I do my martial arts exercises. People always stop and they say, what is that? What are you doing? And so there's something inherent, even when it's done badly by someone like me, there's something inherent in the connection. So I just want to end my talk by saying, I think we're all so fortunate on whatever path we've been on that led us to being here tonight to celebrate the only Newar temple in the world, in the entire history of Buddhism. It's our temple where we can dance and we can connect with the real priest and have an authentic experience. And I can't tell you how happy I am to be here today. And Prajwal, thank you so very much for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to thank you for the Joseph. It's just really, really amazing that it's your knowledge can, benefit lots of people. That's my feelings with this. So I hope that it's also, I want to mention that it's, this temple is not me there now. So you will hear about that now, who is behind there. If I'm me myself, I may not be build this temple. I'll be working the tea house for the rest of my life. So I have so many behind the people. So that's why after this sections, we have other guests you will know that is who are the people who build the temple. And also that tomorrow also, who is there the supporting behind the temple. And also on Monday also, they will be literally who are the people who helping me to grow this. So I'm not, if I myself, I'll be working the tea house and serving teas. That's my life in the past. So yeah, thank you. So we have a 10 minute. We have any question answer. Raise your hands. I will, and then you can ask the questions. Any questions for the Joseph? So we have and then we're going to start with the next session. So just raise your hand. Who's Chris? Okay.
Yes. Joseph, when you were talking, a lot of it was very, very fast paced, but cut some of it. You were talking about no theater, and I did a quick review in my head, and I was thinking, well, if there's martial arts, and if you look at the katas, and if you look at Okinawa, they're all intertied. And you look at the to of the Shinto, they all come from a central place. It's a gestalt. It's outwards coming towards and in. Now there are other cultures that do that, dance wise, and the trans aspect is common with Korea, common with Japan, and common throughout at least some of Siberia. I wouldn't say all of it because of how it is, currently, in Russia. But the tradition is, I guess, dispersed. The movement of the patterning of in the music of Japan, the rhythm of it's the simple 1 and 2 and the back and forth of everything, in the musical forms and the dance forms. They're all there. It's just very, very implicit. But that's a very Shinto way of looking at it. I don't know if you've traversed that yet.
Who's speaking? I can't find you. I'm looking for someone's mouth moving and I can't
right
find
there.
it. Who's talking?
Right here.
Well, I got just 2 pages here. Oh, Chris.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that who's speaking? Who's speaking? Tell your name.
Yes. Chris.
Chris from
Chris.
California.
I'm trying to find you, but I can't find you, Chris. But your point is really good point. I recently wrote a piece that you can find on Buddhist Door about Wu Nuo, WUNUO, which is the scholarship in China around exorcistic ritual that they trace back to their very oldest culture more than 5,000 years ago. So what you're saying is absolutely. And Bugaku is another great art form that just has taken things for generations and eons and taken it till it finally ended up in Japan. And so you're making a very, very good point about something that was common to humans, common to human expression, and things that travel through them. So thank you very much for raising that point. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the communes of Japan, the transform and the theater form, they whether it was supposed to separate or they wanted it to separate, the Shinto, whether the Shinto came first and the dance form came with it, and then the theater proceeded from it.
Right. There's a lot of different questions about it. I think it's important to raise all of those questions, but time is limited. Are there any other questions? I'd like to take some other ones too.
I would like to ask a question with a comment. I would like to say your enthusiasm was just remarkable. Prajwal said he loves the way you talk and he loves your expression as an American, the way you speak. And it just, your enthusiasm was really for the dance and the poetry. And it really triggered a lot of memories of Jules Pfeiffer Dancer, dancing to spring. And it was just very beautiful. So I want to thank you for that. And I don't think I had a question, but thank you.
No, I know a classical Indian dancer that does Jules Pfeiffer dances. It's so funny. You would just love it. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah. What a great thing to bring up. You're not, can't hear you. Anastasia, I can't hear you.
The enthusiasm triggered that. And then I do want to say that there is these TikTok dancers, there's this political thing. They're not signing them. And I'm thinking, we sign,
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Questions for you?
Okay. Oh, Corinne, you're on mute, Corinne.
Hear it from
Corinne, yeah, there you go.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
You go.
Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Louder's better, yeah.
You can speak.
My question to you is, what's next for you? I'm just so interested in what you're into right now. You had mentioned the Mudra project, and I'm not sure what you're doing, but I'd love to hear what you're up to.
Thank you very much for asking. I'm here in Switzerland with a dear friend who's dying, and it's really tough. And a lot of friends are coming in and calling and things. And I'm getting this question of sort of, what career objectives do you have? Well, what career objectives do you have remaining in your life? What career objectives do you have? And I thought, well, I don't have any career objectives. I've had opportunities I never thought I would have. I can't believe they fell to me, and I've tried to live up to them. But now, for me, I take great pleasure in trying to be useful to people like Prajwal, trying to be useful to Buddhist monks, trying to be useful to Japanese snow actors. That gives me great pleasure because I have a little bit of forum, and so I hope I can be. And so for me, I hope we have another 3 years of our Mudra project. It's going well so far. But I think for me, myself, is that if I can just assist others with the platforms that I have and the voice that I've got, that's what I really want to do. We've got another 3 years in our Mudra project left, and we hope that goes well. It's been such uncertain times. Thanks for the comments about enthusiasm. I'm speaking a little freely tonight, a little more freely than I usually do. But yeah, my goal is to keep doing this until the wheels fall off, and keep being as useful as I can be to the people that I love and admire the most. For myself, I've checked off my list a lot, and I really hope now that I've got strength. And I'm just reminded lately, I think it comes to all of us at a certain age, you start realizing your friends get sick and die. And one of my friends said, well, you got to get used to it or you'll go crazy. You got to reconcile with it, because the older you get, more people die, the older you get. So if it terrorizes you every time, you'll just be an old wreck. And so somehow you've got to reconcile the understanding that the flip side of that is how fortunate we are in our life to do the things we do and to have the opportunities that we have. So I just hope to be able to continue doing what I do. It's sort of the only thing I've ever done, and to be doing it to help people that are trying to do the kinds of things that Prajwal was doing, introducing spirituality through dance to the world. It's something I've always believed in, and now I know it's true. So I'm happy to sort of put my skills in that service.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So anybody have other questions? Please raise your hand if you have a question. So Miranda, are you?
I was just gonna
Okay.
ask Joseph if he would consider writing his autobiography, because that was so wonderful, and you have so much knowledge, and it was just all woven together, the whole history of dance from, even getting in the Greek part, because you studied that, and your own trajectory from growing up as a boy in Michigan, it kind of, what do we call that? The Ohio,
The what?
Midwest.
The Midwest,
like
yeah.
starting out the Midwest and being so athletic, and then it's just the way your discovery unfolded is, accompanies the way the West has kind of discovered dance, and then bringing the Asian in, and you have so much knowledge in the way you talk. It was recorded, but I'm saying every sentence that comes out could just be written down directly and be perfect. So it's an important story. The story of your life is an important story.
Thank you, Miranda. Coming from you, that means a lot. I actually have written thing. There was a Helen Ng, who was a great cultural person in Hong Kong, and helped. She was the CEO of the Hong Kong Symphony and the Ho Foundation, and on and on and on for decades. And at the end of her life, the government, the Cultural Association, they said, we want to do whatever you want to do, Helen. We'll do it. And she said, I want to make a book of the most interesting artists I ever met.
Mm-hmm.
And she made this book of 13 artists. And she asked me if I'd be one of them. And I said, sure. What do you want me to write about? She said, write about yourself. I don't write about it's so easy to write about Prajwal. But it's a funny thing to write about yourself. But thank you, Miranda. Do I have a copy of it? I do have a copy of the book that I could share. But thank you very much for saying that. You're a published author. It's a weird thing if someone, Miranda, you've had an extraordinary life. Holy God, I mean, but it's tricky sometimes to write about yourself. I'm not accustomed to it. It wasn't how I was trained as writer, But thank you very much. And my reason in doing it tonight, when Prajwal asked me, was because I kind of think everybody's got their own version of that story, or we wouldn't be here tonight. Every single person here has got, that Josh, come on, he can sing these ancient songs and this ancient music. What a story there, that my life is sort of like everybody else's here in how we got to meet Prajwal in a way. But thank you very much. I'm not dead yet, so maybe I'll get it in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. So let's see. Does anybody have a questions, please?
Joseph, I just wanted to say thank you about sharing your experiences, throughout your life. It's valuable. It's really valuable. I'm a folkloric dancer. When I was younger, I trained in folkloric dance, just as a hobby, but I learned the music, I learned the dance. And we learned the stories because I'm Filipino, and I learned my culture that way. I was born here. And I remember my big brothers who were the aunties of the group, the big brothers who were the teachers, who were the aunties of the group, and they all said, one after the other, it didn't matter who you were, be yourself, it's okay. And then, very regally walked across and danced across and taught all of the dances and meanings behind them. And they're still alive in the Philippines, which is a miracle in and of itself, because colonialism twice over, once with the Spanish and the American, it took hold, but your stories re-inspire what we have left. And you were saying in the 20s through the 40s and the 50s, that whole it would break your career if they found out you're quote unquote different. We didn't have that in the Philippines until later, but that unlearning it is still yet to be found. We have a big pride about bravado and showing ourselves to be there, and we don't need to keep that. We can keep it, but it can be alongside what we originally were. And when she said writing an autobiography, even if it's in a anecdotal small form, that would be, whether you do it or not, that's not important, but expressing it is valuable, it's precious. Thank you so much, Joseph.
Thank you. Let me just say a couple things about folk dance. I would recommend a book by a German Swiss woman who did a DVD with Prajwal, Gabriela Wosien, Wosien. And she wrote a book called Sacred Dance. I think it's probably the best book written on sacred dancing, to tell the truth. But she's Bulgarian, and her father was a Bulgarian folk dancer, but he was folk going into ritual, going into paganism, going into really incredible. Her whole knowledge of sacred dance comes through folk dancing. And you might want to read her book and also see the DVD she made with Prajwal, because it really comes out of that. It's just wonderful.
One last thing about the reference of Madonna and her learning. I had no idea she had learned dance in college, in university.
She was a major, yeah.
I had no idea. And I mean, as much as I understand and I think cultural appropriation exists, it grows alongside, and rather it's right to grow alongside cultural appreciation. And we can't divorce one and yet not accept one without the other, because you can't have one without the other. It's one can't grow forth and arise without the one growing from that. You can't. It's like a lotus growing in clear water. You can't do that.
Right.
Whether that tension is needed or not, well, probably not. But when she borrowed voguing from, the vogue, the voguing from the dance halls of New York of that day. Well, not New York by itself, but throughout the African American sphere. Voguing in the balls, in the drag halls. It was important for her to bring it to the forefront in a time when those all of these different eclectic cultures they weren't the melting pot that we wanted it to be yet.
No,
LGBT and the mainstream, whether it's called mainstream or not important, but our cultures needed to come to the forefront. It's something where
Yeah.
that had to come to the forefront. And thank you so much for that too, Joseph.
Well, I will defer to you. I think those are very wise comments, and I will defer to you having an observation about it from your perspective. I think that's really wise, and I appreciate your comments. I think they're just great. I've actually, that's the most eloquent thing I've heard about it ever. Anybody ever said about cultural appropriation is it goes with they go hand in hand, like all opposites go together hand in hand. That was very wise. I'm going to appropriate it if you don't mind.
Oh, no.
I'll give you credit. I'll give you credit every time I say
it. Well, thank you.
So
You're welcome. No, thank you.
Only a couple minutes. So if anybody have, then we take a few minutes, just a silent break. Then we're going to start with the next section. So anybody have a quick question? So make it a quick, very quick question. So we have only a couple minutes. So okay. Then maybe we take a few minutes just to hang on with the same link. So we'll take a little break and then we come back in 4 minutes. So we have only 4 minutes to leave it on. So, and then I have to say, this is so lovely. It's Joseph. You are the living treasure in the dance world. So without you, I'm not being recognized, because of you made it so much for me and promoting for me. So that's that's why I get connected with today we have from Brazil, we have a joining from Brazil, we have joining from the India, we have a joining from the Austria. So this is wonderful. There's a New York, there's a lots of in California. Oh, we have also from Mexico. Today it's joining from lots of different countries. So thank you. Okay, so we're going to get a little bit so transitioning moving, but this is just, you can hold on just to take a few minutes long breathe. So we can start in 3 minutes right now. So
Helen, I want to say, I'm Chris. It's 2:15 in the morning here. I'm really tired. I will watch this recording, I promise. I'm so happy to see you, Helen.